Start it. So I guess that means we've started. Yeah, okay. So hello everyone and welcome to the last in the series of webinars about Brick Lane, Spitalfields in the context of the planning application that's going through Tower Hamlets Council by the Truman Brewery to put a shopping mall and office block onto the Truman Brewery site. Spitalfields Trust and East End Preservation Society are running a campaign against this application. We think it's the wrong kind of application submitted at the wrong time in the wrong manner. We think there are obviously good ways to develop Truman Brewery for the benefit of the community, for the benefit of Brick Lane, and for the benefit of London, but we don't think this is the right way to go about it. The planning meeting is tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. and by the end of this webinar, I'll try to put the link up to the meeting because it's possible for those of you who are interested to watch the whole proceedings live. For tonight, we just want to, well, basically keep the pressure up, I guess, on the decision makers. It's always worth writing in an objection if you haven't yet done so. I would say it's never too late to object. So if you're minded to, please email Patrick Harmansworth at towerhamlets.gov.uk expressing your opinion on the development. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Brick Lane trading culture with a particular view to the curry restaurants of Brick Lane, but also more generally, we're kind of interested in what makes the kind of, if you like, the economic makeup of Brick Lane and the cultural makeup of Brick Lane that makes it what it is and makes it quite distinctive and an interesting place for people to visit. And this is largely due to, well, not only due, but largely due to the fact that there's an incredible diversity of independent proprietor-run small businesses that run the various shops and other activities on Brick Lane. Which makes it a fantastically interesting place to visit. That it's almost exemplary in that sense, and this is the kind of culture, that fragile culture that needs to be respected and conserved, and where we need to be very, very careful when planning applications come in, that they're not going to decimate a kind of very fragile ecosystem. We have two speakers tonight who are going to do short presentations on the this kind of trading makeup. We have Rihanna Lingham from Lunar and Curious, who used to be in Brick Lane and has now moved to Calvert Avenue on the Boundary Estate. And later on, we'll have Saif Osmani from the Bengali East End Heritage Society, who will talk about the makeup of Brick Lane, particularly from the Bengali and local point of view, I think. And then just to let you know what we've been up to on the weekend, just as a last minute push for the campaign, some banners appeared overnight on Brick Lane, imploring people to take part in the battle for Brick Lane. And this particular banner is interesting because it spans Brick Lane between one of the Taj Stores, which is one of the wholesaler shops that supplies a lot of the curry houses in Brick Lane, and the Standard, which is indeed one of those curry houses, and getting these stores to cooperate and agree to take a position on the Truman Brewery is in itself an interesting process, and it's caused a lot of interesting debate on Brick Lane amongst the traders, which has been very healthy. On the weekend, a number of us went door to door up and down Brick Lane talking to traders and asking them what they thought of the brewery planning application, if indeed they knew about it at all, and if they didn't want to support it, whether they would put the name to a letter to submit to the council. We actually, in the space of pretty much one afternoon, we managed to get together the names of 90 of the independent businesses of Brick Lane to subscribe to a letter on their behalf, which I think is phenomenal. I mean, imagine what would have happened if we'd had more time. And I think it shows what reasonably small effort is required to actually properly start a consultation process for and on behalf of local residents and local businesses. It's not that difficult to do, and sometimes it does puzzle us as to why these large planning applications come in with a strictly regulated consultation process that just seem to fail. It is not that difficult. Before we go on to round out, I'll just give you, for those of you who aren't that familiar with Brick Lane, I just want to play this little walk along a little bit of Brick Lane, which shows us a few of the curry houses, which are managing to operate now because they've managed to squeeze out some seating outside. And you can see that in spite of rumours of the death of the curry culture of Brick Lane, it's still, you know, to some degree, we could say itself, although the numbers have declined, you know, it is still there. Brick Lane is still a good place to visit. Let's hope it stays that way. Now, this particular row of curry houses is interesting because it takes us up to Woodseer Street, which has this wall running down it, which is the edge of the Truman Brewery complex. And behind that wall is the space where the proposed shopping mall and office block will be built. So you can see that it's going to have it's very close proximity to what I call the southern part of Brick Lane, which is the Brick Lane running down below the Truman Brewery site. And you can see that it's going to have a very significant effect, for better or worse, on the, put it trivially, the Brick Lane curry culture, which is perhaps trivializing it a little bit. Anyway, what I'd like to do now is turn to Rihanna, who's going to tell us a bit about her experience at Brick Lane and also about the East End Trades Guild, which is a campaigning group that she's a part of.
Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar, and thank you so much for having me here. I'm just going to share my screen. If Jonathan, if you could stop sharing, thank you.
I can do that.
Thank you. Right. Hi, so I'm from a shop called Lunar and Curious, and we've been going for 14 years. This is a rather glamorous, little bit outdated photo, but available. So I have 3 business partners, so myself, Polly George, and Carew Parry, and essentially we started on Brick Lane. Oh, sorry, going too quick. In 2006, and we actually set up, it was a group of us, about 7 of us, set up a shop to sell our own products. We'd worked out that for the price of a day on the Sunday markets, we could actually all club together and have a shop that we opened every single day, if there was the trade to be selling to. So Lunar and Curious is designers that set it up, and in our current form there's 3 of us, and we sell lots of independent brands from the UK and Europe, And we also make our own clothing, our own ceramics, for women's and kids knitwear in Scotland. We make our women's wear as well in factories, very small factories around East London as well. So it's really lovely actually to be invited to do this and to think about the past of Lunar and Curious and those years on Brick Lane, the 2006 to 2010, and just to cast my mind back and think what Lunar and Curious was at that time and what Brick Lane was at the time. And really thinking about it, it was quite quiet, you know. We would take 100 quid and think that was sort of reasonable, and you know, it wasn't a busy shop. But it was, so we were the North End, if we're with Jonathan talking about it, up by the bagel shops. And really there was the South End, which was curry houses and, you know, the shops that supported that, the remnants of the fabric shops and the fashion trade, and then the leather shops until you sort of got to the north. So you had, we sort of felt like we were Cheshire Street plus, I suppose. We sort of felt like that was our end. And I think we felt probably quite, maybe a little bit invasive actually on the Bengali culture, on the Jewish fashion trade, and saw what was changing. And but it's just, I've got some photos here. We celebrated on the birthdays, so we used to be out on the street all the time, so you could see this was a Saturday, no cars whizzing by, nothing, it was really quiet. So it just wasn't that incredible tourist trap that it has become. This was our third birthday, and in here in the corner on the little television set, we managed to find a film from the BFI. We got permission to play a film that was filmed in our shop from the 50s, I think. Unfortunately, I've completely forgotten what the name of that is. Oh, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. My new laptop's too sensitive. So yeah, so thinking about also why we left. So we left in 2010, and we had a very short-term lease. I think we had about 4 leases in the period that we were in that 4-year period, and the landlords were aware of the increasing rents and what were putting more and more pressure on doing short-term leases so they could do more reviews, and it just became sort of unsustainable and unsecure for us to stay there. And so we then moved to Calvert Avenue, to the Boundary Estate, to Arnold Circus. So we are now tenants of Tower Hamlets, and on a longer lease, still having rent issues. But so I also am a member, one of the founding members of the East End Trades Guild, which is an alliance of 300 small independent businesses and self-employed. And it began with protecting, is gardener's bags, I think was the starting point in Spitalfields, and the rent hikes that he was facing, and the protection so to campaign. And what we realized was that there was a need for these independent businesses, because everyone was facing challenges to their businesses individually. But if we were to all club together and all fight for the same cause, to keep independent businesses in the East End, to not be pushed out by developments and high-rising rents, and also the fashion of the area and what that brings to us, so people can come as sort of on a marketing budget, so they can have a shop that's essentially for marketing purposes, so they don't pay a realistic rent, they can pay higher rents, and that the impact that that has on small businesses that have been in the area for a really long time. So the East End Trades Guild have been working for years, and particularly very concentrated recently, on a commercial rent manifesto. And so in terms of the London elections, we have put together a campaign to face the candidates for mayor, and these are points that we want to ask them and campaign for, and then follow this work through. So we want to make commercial rents affordable for small businesses. So looking at ways, we're working with the New Economics Foundation to look at ways to create a London working rent that allows us to not have these massive rent hikes, and to have a fair rent that we can sustain and feel secure that our businesses are protected for the long term. Look at celebrating good landlords, so accreditation schemes that allow the landlord to have a sort of badge of honor that gives them power and value and recognition from local councils, or even the councils can be this, and the public sector as landlords can get this scheme. We also talking about protecting industrial areas, in terms of that there's still quite a lot of light industrial which feeds in. So as I said about us manufacturing in East London, that the businesses don't support the don't lose the light industrial that has also built up cultural heritage. And we're talking about doing a community land trust, and in future in terms of getting power and owning a space. And then also creating a register of landlords and comparable evidence. So with an app we're developing called Rent Check, you can join and you can see what your local area, what real rents are being paid, but also that a public register is available for you to look at. So no more of the threats of putting up rents and this person's paying this amount, and actually that's an untruth. And last week at Spitalfields farm, our members met with Sadiq Khan and asked him to all these asks that we've said, and he signed off on all of them and agreed to work with us and meet with us if he's re-elected again. So it's really going forward and progressing. So in terms of Brick Lane and the curry houses, and just, you know, the East End Trades Guild is definitely here for any independent businesses, and the more we are, the more powerful we are. But also just that, you know, clubbing together as independent businesses and as the people that want the independent businesses to be there, the customers, you know, we are a loud voice and we can create a strength to protect those areas. Thank you for listening. I'm available, I think, for questions later on if there are any.
Thanks, Joanna. And of course, this is very relevant because perhaps the underlying fear of imposing things like a new shopping mall in the middle of Brick Lane, and also with the office space above it and the kind of people that it'll bring into the heart of Brick Lane, is that it will have a inflationary pressure on rents all the way up and down the street. And there's currently no mechanism available to us, no tools available to us to stop that happening. And I would imagine that if there were tools available, it would be possible to have more reasonable conversations with developers about planning applications like this one. But at the moment, it seems we're faced with nothing, nothing to hold on to, and no reassurances that can be guaranteed. So let's hope that Sadiq Khan, if he gets elected, takes this as seriously as he should. Right, what do I want to do now? I've got a few little bits of video of some of the restaurants and related people who work in some of the restaurants and related trades in Brick Lane, which we interviewed over the weekend. So I'm just going to play a few of those. Now that, and one of the reasons to do this, let's just see if I can find it. It must be this one. Try that. Share. Yeah. So one of the reasons we were keen to actually do something as basic as talk to people about how they felt about the application was that I think there's a fear that we're not a campaign against the development is not speaking for the actual local community that it will affect. So we thought it was very important to actually allow them to speak for themselves, actually, and get a proper feel for how how that is. I mean, it's a fairly basic question, because you would have thought that bringing a brand spanking new development in the middle of Brick Lane could be potentially welcomed by local traders. That might almost be the obvious position to take. So we thought it would. So it's absolutely vital for us to be certain that what we are saying is a shared concern of people who are actually, whose lives are affected immediately trading on Brick Lane. So let's just play. These are fairly short snippets of a few people that wanted to speak to camera. The first of which is Jakob, who works in the Aladdin restaurant, which was one of the restaurants I showed you in that little walkthrough. Let's hope we can hear that.
Hi, my name is Jakob, and I have been here for more than since I was 7 years old. Since 1986, this community, and this community is friendly oriented, like a family oriented. At the moment, if they want to open the business around here, it's going to affect us. I have been living here for more than 25 years around this side, and everybody is like a tight community. Everybody know each other, and all the businesses and everything, we know each other, and they've been running for very well. And at the moment, the way we are running is very good, and we don't want no a new building to break and everything to open new shopping centers. At the moment, the way it is very good, and the tourism business, people come to see the historical buildings and everything. The one we have at the moment. Once we start breaking things, nothing don't gonna work. I don't think so. People will gonna come and see the shopping center. If they want to see the shopping center, they could go Westfield or they could go West End. But here, they want to check the rivers and the art, the old building, historical building, the mosque, the traditional restaurants, This is the thing that people come to see. And the way they're running everything, I think we should live like this and not to break anything and not to develop any new businesses. Thank you.
Okay, that's Jakob. Also, let me just try make this screen bigger. Yeah. So the next one, maybe I can't make the screen bigger. How do I go to the next page? All right. Oh, there we go. That worked. So the next one is interesting. This is Asmal from Preem Restaurant. Now, Preem Curry House is quite, I think it's one of the most well-known curry restaurants of Brick Lane. And Asmal himself is quite a well-known, I think a very well-known character, and has been here trading there for, I think about 23 years. And he's definitely, obviously, he's got his heart and soul pinned to the community. And I know that in the past, I mean, he, it wasn't just about running a restaurant. I mean, he was trying, I do remember he was doing local kind of community-driven cookery classes and things like that, really trying to kind of get the community integrated into what he's doing. Now, slightly interesting facet of talking to Asmal, of course, is is that if you look at this Preem curry house in this picture, the building just the shop front just to the left of it with that bit of blue awning is also his. And actually Preem Curry House did occupy 3 shop fronts worth of space. But the 2 shop fronts to the left, he's now converted into a kind of upmarket fish restaurant. So that kind of interesting. I think it points to some of the contradictions here about culture, tradition, and economics, and how people go at it. The other, so I mean, Asma said to me that the reason he's changed from doing curry to the fish bar is that he's finding it. He won't do a curry unless he does a good quality curry, and he's finding it harder and harder to sustain that economically, to actually keep a high standard of food if he's providing Indian food. And for some reason or other, if you do a kind of contemporary fish bar with a few cocktails, it's more profitable. The other thing that's interesting about Asmal is that actually he is a freeholder. Most of the curry restaurants and other traders on Brick Lane pay rent, which is where the whole EETG conversation comes into play. But Asmal's interesting because he's a freeholder. So you would have thought that he would not have rent, given that he's not having rent increases to fear. You would have kind of imagined that he'd be someone who'd be quite well disposed to having a spanking new shopping mall and office block next to his shop. But let's see what he's got to say about this.
My name is Ajmal Hussain. I am the Secretary of Brick Lane Restaurant Association, and I am the local resident as well. I have a lot of property in this area, and 4 or 5 restaurants also. I'm here in 20 to 22 years, and it's changes which is like modernization I don't like, because this should be a conservation area. Conservation area plus council do the floor, the street, they change the cobblestone to turmeric. I don't like it. Plus, they are modernizing a lot of things, high-rise buildings. This is a small local area. If you give permission to one, give to everybody then. Then there is areas, what area represent is value goes out. So you have to be, if you put a conservation area and in the same time give permission to a high-rise building, then what's the point to have a conservation area? I hope people understand that one.
Does it change a lot?
Yes, yes. It's no longer conservation area. In paper, maybe in practice now. Truman Brewery rich man, they are doing what they want, but what local people want, I'm supporting what local people wants.
So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting, and I thought it was particularly interesting that he mentioned a number of times the need to respect the conservation area. Brick Lane is part of is a conservation area, and it's surrounded by other conservation areas. And increasingly, I mean, my personal experience is that increasingly it seems that counts for little when it comes to new development proposals. So I think it's really important that we stress that these things do mean something. And I think it's fantastic that you made a connection between conservation and local community. I think that's quite often forgotten, that conservation isn't just about bricks and mortars. It's as much about community. Right, let's see who's next in this little slideshow. Oh yeah, so Taj Stores is interesting. They're actually not a restaurant, but they're a supplier to many of the restaurants. So they're and I think this is quite a good expression of the fact that the kind of restaurant culture of Brick Lane isn't just about the restaurants. It's also about the people who live there, the people who work there, and the businesses that feed into those restaurants. So let's see what Jane Taj has to say.
I'm Janelle, one of the directors of Taj Stores. Taj Stores is one of the oldest businesses on Brick Lane. We've been established for over 80 years now. We are third generation. And obviously we're playing a big part in the community. Supply all the restaurants and the local community, they do depend on us. Recently, with all the different changes in the area, it's making difficult for people to come into Brick Lane. Like last summer, when the roads were all closed, people were finding difficult to park outside the shop because they can't shop. And if people are going to be doing heavy shopping, they need to bring their cars. That was one of the reasons it was really difficult. And with our deliveries, we're turning our deliveries back because the lorries couldn't enter Brick Lane. And I've heard the council is proposing to do this year as well. But fingers crossed, hope it doesn't go through because it's going to be really bad for the community and the surrounding areas of Brick Lane. Because obviously there's no adequate parking spaces. And talking of parking spaces, with the new development of the Truman Brewery, that's going to cause even more heartache for local residents to park, to come to the area. I mean, obviously traffic's going to be even heavier. Small businesses are going to suffer because rents will go up. Their rents will go up. Living accommodation rental will also go up. So I mean, there's a lot of negative factors towards the development. But yes, see how it goes. And I just hope the council has some sense and thinks about the local businesses, the local community, especially the small businesses. I mean, we all do play a big part in the society. So yeah, just keep us in mind, really. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We all do play a big part. I think that's well said. Let's see. Do we have another one? Oh yeah, so this is interesting. Not a restaurant at all. Panna runs the local post office, which is also Brick Lane Souvenirs. And again, someone who we would think, may or may not feel that a development like that could benefit them. Let's see what Panna say. Oh, and apologies, it was a bit windy when we interviewed him, so you'll have to listen carefully. Hang on. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Hang on a sec. I have to rewind if I can work it out. Yeah, there we go. Try again. Let's do it like that. You can start to tell us who you are and what your business is.
Yeah, my name is Akhlaq Kupanna. I run a post office in Brick Lane, 168. And I've been doing a gift shop for a while, but in the last 2 years, I've started a post office franchise, and it's going pretty well.
Do you know about the plan to put a shopping mall in the Truman Brewery?
I didn't know until I spoke to you guys today. We had no idea, nobody told us.
Okay. How do you feel about having a shopping mall here on your doorstep?
The way I feel it, I mean, if there is a big shopping center put in the middle of Brick Lane, I mean, all the local businesses, all the small businesses will be affected, and there will be different kind of people coming into Brick Lane, and local business will struggle. The rent of the local business shops will go high, rent of the residential will go high. And if you think about the retail mall in Brick Lane, we know even in central London and other areas, all the retail units, shopping mall are struggling to paying their rates, paying their rent. Many of them are not even paying a single rent and rate for last 1 year. Everyone is struggling. So while other business center, other shopping center are struggling, offices are closing down, people are working from home, I don't understand the point of building another shopping mall in just close.
Oh, sorry, hang on. That's me having my own technical difficulties. I want to, sorry, let me just get back to.
And there will be different kind of people coming into Brick Lane, and local business will struggle. The rent of the local business shops will go high. Rent of the residential will go high. And if you think about the retail mall in Brick Lane, we know even in central London and other areas, all the retail units, shopping mall are struggling to paying their rates, paying their rent. Many of them are not even paying a single rent and rate for last 1 year. Everyone is struggling. So while other business center, other shopping center are struggling, offices are closing down, people are working from home, I don't understand the point of building another shopping mall in just close to central London, in East London. So I don't think it's a good idea.
So you don't think it will benefit your business or the other businesses around?
I don't think it would. I don't think it will benefit my business or other business. Or I think it's not going to benefit the whole as a country, as a society. Building new shopping mall is not a good idea at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. You're welcome. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Anna. Next is okay. This is quite interesting. Grand Bangla isn't open at the moment. It's being fitted out as we speak. We just walking past and started talking to the guys and see what they were up to. And I think this one's an interesting contrast to what's happened with what's happening with Asmal and the way he's turned 2/3 of his curry business into a upmarket fishmonger cocktail bar. Grand Bangla is opening a traditional, very traditional Bengali restaurant for Bengalis. And I think this is, as a new venture, this is quite interesting insight into how Brick Lane is perhaps more sustainable than we think. There's a lot of fear that everything's gone, it's all over, all of this kind of rhetoric. But down here at the south end of Brick Lane, things seem to be changing for the positive as well as the negative. Let's see what they have to say.
What made you and 5 others buy this place?
The main reason was culture. We're losing our heritage because Brick Lane, if you look at Brick Lane as it is, in the 50s when my grandfather's uncle, brother's dad came into this country, the Brick Lane was the main hub. And at the moment, I mean, as the generation growing and it's losing the generation, so we wanted to keep that. And this is the only way we can keep with the food.
So you were representing our culture through our food.
Yeah.
But also this place is historically ours.
Yeah.
It's always been a Bengali restaurant.
That's true.
So why would you want to let it go for? Exactly. So that's exactly what I told you. So a very, very good reason to buy a place, not for the profit.
So you're trying hard to perpetuate a tradition.
But this place is not, it's not a money-making business.
Cultural.
This is cultural, purely like,
we
don't, this place, you're not going to be rich out of it.
It's about retaining a piece of something that's ours. Does that make sense? So, these are my friends. I'll be honest with you. I'm doing this job here out of passion rather than money. It's not about the money.
But how do you feel about the fact that there are a lot of people trying to make money from Brick Lane? And did you hear?
I mean, it's not wrong doing that. That's as business as it is. It's not wrong in that, making money out of Brick Lane. But the point is, you have to look at a bigger picture where the country is like. If you look at why do the government do census every 10 years? Is the reality. Why do they do it? Because they want to see where the population are moving. Which way?
Do you know what
they're not political? Any census, like that's how this is. So if you look at especially Tower Hamlets, not just Brick Lane, Tower Hamlets. If you go in 90s, it was majority Bengalis, but now it's gentrification. What's the word?
Gentrification.
Yeah. What they have done, they're not building any 3-4 bedroom houses. They're building 1-bedroom houses. What's the reason for that? Who's doing that? Who's making you people move? You have to
house prices.
No. Even the house prices, even the council properties, the people, they're saying to the people, you don't have 3-bedroom property here. You have to go and loot it.
Yeah.
But that's what
They're making people move away.
Move away.
Yeah, larger families.
Yeah,
So they are changing the culture of this borough
yeah,
by forcing people. It's like with the cars. They're forcing people to not drive into Huntington.
that's it.
It's almost a nightmare to drive in. It took me 2.5 hours to get to work there.
That's it.
So,
And actually, that mention of Luton's interesting because I believe that Sam Jones, who was Brick Lane local, I think he now had to move out to somewhere like Luton. And I thought that was interesting to make that point about housing and how it's not simply about rent inflation, but it's also about the kind of accommodation that is available to people, especially if you look, say, at the local Bengali community. They are close-knit families that tend to need larger sized homes, and we all, I think many of us know that there's a housing crisis in London and particularly acute in Tower Hamlets, and I think that point is very well made that new developments, when they include housing, especially on the private side of the development, are invariably 1 and 2 bedroom housing, and this is not in it by any means any kind of community building. A point that will be made at the planning meeting tomorrow is that the developments that Truman Brewery owners have in mind for the brewery site have no housing included at all. And one of our asks is that is reconsidered, and that all developments need to include housing for the local community. Now, I think that's the end of our interviews, and I have a feeling that if I do that, we're now going to go to Saif from the Bengali East End Heritage Society to tell us a bit about the heritage and culture of Brick Lane, which I think means I have to stop sharing. I can, I'll do that. Oh, there we go. Stop sharing. Bear with me. I did it right. Stop share. There we go. Right. So I think, Saif, you should be able to screen share now.
So, hi, John. Is that been shared? There we go. Share. Hello, my name's Saif Osmani. I'm a local artist and designer. I was actually born on Woodseer Street in Albert Cottages, so this place is very important to me growing up, and also as an artist growing up. I come from art school. Brick Lane was very important as a place to do exhibitions, take over ad hoc spaces, and experiment with various interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary sort of forms of art. So so those memories continued as Brick Lane sort of changed. So today I just wanted to kind of give an impression or give an idea of what culture means on Brick Lane, and how it's not this one-dimensional block like you're Asian, I'm black, you're white, and all the rest of it, but Brick Lane actually fosters a highly multicultural environment. The Spiritfuls Banglatown label really kind of kicked off in the late 80s, early 90s, when actually local people were describing the area as Banglatown, and this the planners probably either got worried or thought that this could be capitalized on, so they kind of took the lower the northern end of Brick Lane and said that actually this area is a designated Banglatown. But from my research anyway, I found that actually a lot of people identify Banglatown right the way from Petticoat Lane Market all the way down to Whitechapel, and Brick Lane is obviously central to that. So in the early 2000s, what was happening on Brick Lane or around Brick Lane going up to Shoreditch was the Asian underground music scene had started off. And so and they were mentioning things like Banglatown quite a lot. So it's starting to become a really hip place to kind of hang out in. And similarly, like I mentioned, the art scenes really popped up soon after that or around that same time. And at that time, there was a balance. And a lot of people say there was quite a healthy balance between community businesses, newcomers, and the art local people. And for example, artists coming in And that was kind of evident in the fact that, you know, Brick Lane was very much liked and a lot of people lived there. I know people who otherwise would not have spoken. You know, Brick Lane facilitated and helped that because there were communities coming in and they were speaking, whereas at the moment you might not necessarily find that. And if we fast forward to 2016, on the left there you'll see a lamp, those lamp posts, which are different from the ones there that are presently on Brick Lane, because those were specifically made and bespokely made for Brick Lane by artist called Mina Thakur. Now those were removed in 2016, and so me, a local youth worker and an actor, a Bangladeshi actor, we came together and we said, oh, hang on a minute, there's all these changes going on, we're not really being consulted. So what are the means by which we, you know, start to have a say about what happens culturally, because we're very much in it. You know, I was showing exhibitions, the other person was doing youth work and acting and so forth. And so we set up the Bengali Eastern Heritage Society in view of trying to change policy on things. So sometimes we go to the GLA and have a go at them about, you know, how their policies just don't reflect what's happening on the ground. And so it's a kind of continuous process for us. You know, we've kept the organization quite loose, so we can do art projects all the way up to kind of policy work. In the 1970s and 80s, there were, you know, everybody knows there was big demolition plans for the East End. So the Bangladeshis moving into the area was really, really crucial, because otherwise a lot of the buildings probably would have been demolished. And so, but the real upward trend started in 1981 when the birth rate of the East End, instead of declining, had gone upwards, and that was very much attested to or attached to the Bangladeshi arrivals there. So the photos you see on the side are part of an exhibition which I'm showing, which is 184 photographs of the Bengali East End mainly, and its relationship between heritage policies and relationship with context and the creative industries. So a lot of people will know this anyway, but the reason a lot of the units there on Brick Lane are quite small is because often the textile workers of the past had to make kind of small runs of clothes, and often they were sewing beside the windows, and you'll find that's usually one room depth. And the reason is because they can make the full use of the light throughout the day, so they could be at the end of the other window at the on the back window, and then that way they can make the best use of light. So this flexibility was actually really important when the Bangladeshis moved in as well, because the heads of families were able to work both upstairs and downstairs, and the schools were nearby and so forth. So it really worked quite well for them. So there was a period in the 80s where cloth workers and leather workshop factories were popular, and in fact were good places for people to work in, and Brick Lane facilitated that quite a lot. Now, the closure of these industries and factories had led to the Bangladeshis starting off their own cafes. So contrary to popular belief that the restaurants somehow popped up, actually it was the cafes that popped out slowly that were then turned into restaurants. So the identity of that changed. And don't forget, a lot of them were called Indian restaurants at the first instance, and now they're called Bangladeshi restaurants, or that identity was slightly claimed a bit later. If you fast forward again now to the impact of Brick Lane and Brick Lane's curry industries, you'll see that the occupancy of this migrant group was really important to the financial viability of the area. I'm using kind of corporate language here, but I don't normally, but it was important because what happened was the place started, sustainably returning profit, and so and then that could be calculated. And so the landowners, like we're seeing today, were very much the beneficiaries of that. And in a way you could say, and I hate to use the term victims of their own success, but what's happened on Brick Lane is that the rest of the country saw that and said, well, we can do that. So I've heard stories of places outside of London where, for example, other Asian groups are trying to kind of take and create their own little towns and so forth and so forth. And that's been written about a lot. So there's been an impact of from Brick Lane that we can see, which is to be celebrated, I think. So as you know, there's long-term impacts of gentrification. Gentrification is a horrible word in the way that it makes us think that we're against people dressed up nicely with bowler hats and sticks and polished shoes, but actually gentrification, we know, leads to polarization, displacement. As the people said earlier, the rent rises are an important thing, an important factor that people experience daily in the East End, across the East End, in fact. When I spoke to, and when John and I and various others went to around Brick Lane, a lot of the things that they brought up were changes in consumer behavior, footfall, which is a complete lie, because a lot of people are actually registering online and walking straight from Aldgate East all the way down to wherever their venue is. They're not necessarily stopping. So, and also the rate of adaptation at community scale happens very differently and it's usually slower. So they don't necessarily have all the means and the finance to be able to catch up with all the changes that are happening, for example, at the southern end, at the northern end of Brick Lane. And the other thing the traders said was they didn't really have the space to grow. So in fact, the vacant sites, which is like the Truman Brewery, is not really facilitating them to grow, but in fact is facilitating for other businesses, which are brands, international brands, which are not related to the area, to capitalize on the Brick Lane brand itself. You can read more about this on the Beyond Banglatown report, which was released by Runnymede Trust last year. So here's some photographs which form part of the exhibition. So I've been told to talk about culture. So culture is more than the restaurant. So what I found from my research is that culture, and Bangladeshi people in particular, look at customs as culture. They also, what came out highly on the list was religious culture, and building features were increasingly being eroded by the planning system, unfortunately, in the local area. And so what you were finding was, for example, like the lampshades that we saw in the lampposts that we saw earlier, that things of cultural value or association were slowly being removed, with the view possibly of removing the Bangladeshi presence on Brick Lane. So one thing we have to be aware of is that culture, it shouldn't be solely defined through just one means, because usually it's multi-faceted, and the Bangladeshis still live in the area, which I have to constantly remind people of, because just because they don't see so many of them, because they're working or whatever, that's very much, it's very much alive. It's a very lived culture. So if you look at the British Bangladeshi culture in the area, what's been facilitated is a very unique thing. It's a British Bangladeshi culture. You're not going to see that in other areas. I mean, in Newham, you're not going to see it. In neighbouring Hackney, you're not going to see it in the same way. So this area is also a psychogeography for British Bangladeshis and for their identity. And at the sort of what's happening is, in fact, we're seeing a huge shift, and Brick Lane being at the receiving end of corporate internationalized street art and advertising, which is a big movement that's happening. So you find that a lot of the graffiti art as well is starting to reflect brands, corporate brands, and so forth. So that's one of the photographs of one of the estates nearby. And so finally, I just want to kind of make everyone aware that this is happening across the East End to other Bangladeshi groups as well. So a few years ago, we spoke about actually it's probably about 5-6 years ago now, we spoke at a talk about the Crossrail and the impacts of that to Whitechapel. So when the new council offices move, will the council executives, will they want to see a different style of shop? Will they want to see a different style of stall? Chris Street Market was their planning talk was ridiculous in that it didn't really give any trader representation when I was there. And also the really big worry, which I think is underlying this, is the digital aspect that's coming into these areas, how actually you can create digital divides across communities and in fact make people poorer. So if you look at certain documentaries like Coded Bias and so forth, you can see that's just based on race. People can be in the similar area of a similar background, but just on race that they'll have less opportunities. So that's something to really think about when we're looking at why the changes are happening on Brick Lane. For me personally, one of the wishes is to have a co-created and co-produced method of kind of looking at, sensitively looking at the restaurant sector across the communities and across multiple generations, so that the value systems that we spoke about and the ones that Rihanna spoke about are kind of brought back in some capacity, if that's possible. And finally, I can talk about this probably the whole day, if not the whole week, but I've got a talk coming up this Wednesday at UCL as part of their lunchtime lecture series on why is cultural heritage under threat in London, with a specific focus on Banglatown from the research that I've undertaken. My details are there should anyone wish to contact me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Saif. That was really interesting. I'm just going to share. This is the complications of sharing screens. I just want to share. He says pausing because I can't for a minute work out. Oh, here we go. Share screen. I'm supposed to be a technical whiz kid, but it just seems to be not working out that way today. So sharing that screen again. Yeah, just all I'm doing is sharing a link. This is a live link to the planning meeting tomorrow night for anyone who's wants to be riveted by planning meetings. First item on the agenda is indeed Truman Brewery, and we're running out of time, but I did thought that was really interesting. I just wanted to kind of knit together a couple of things. Well, first of all, a really quick, simple question for you, Saif, which was the Banglatown. I don't know if you remember when the Banglatown brand came in with the council, but I think it was the late 90s. And it was you were mentioning street furniture and things like that. Now, I think at the time there was some, for better or worse, the council did provide some kind of street furniture, and I think there was even an arch at the beginning of Brick Lane and stuff to do with Bengali culture. Was that genuine, or was that window decoration? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I completely remember that, and it's still there. I mean, the arch, there's a bit of an issue with the arch because when I spoke to the area managers a few years ago, they said that there was obviously some other conversation happening whereby the arch, which is in between Brick Lane, Lower Brick Lane, and Osborne Street, that the arch is somehow in the way of large lorries going past. So I said, well, that's kind of weird because the area is always, had smaller lorries. So obviously the large lorries are reaching somewhere, and I think there's a bit of a viability issue there. And they keep wanting to redesign the arch, having kind of not taken care of it for a while. And there was also the other arch, which I called the was it Tracy Emin, was it 2002 or something, where Tracy Emin opposed some hijab gates, as they were called, which again didn't go through a consultation process. Otherwise, you wouldn't be calling it something as insensitively as she did. But I think there's, I think it really does come down to the openness of the council, really, and the decision makers as to whether they can co-produce something that works for all the communities living there. I think it's possible because it's happened before. I think it's just a case of whether also the landowners there are willing to kind of go back to to their original brief, in a way. I mean, if you like, which is the 1988 community plan, which said that communities should be at the heart of any development that's happening locally.
And I'm glad you mentioned that community plan, because it's worth reminding people. So one of the community asks for this application, or the problems with it, is we're pointing out that there's a complete lack of a master plan for the whole brewery site, and it's very difficult to see how decisions can be made on a part of the site like this when we don't know what's in mind for the next bit of the Truman Brewery site. And back in the late 80s, that thing that you just referred to, Saif, I think was a attempt at a community-led master plan for the Truman Brewery site and the Goods Yard site, as looking at the whole thing as a whole, and a great deal of effort was put into that as a community-led plan. For some reason, we seem to have lost sight of the fact that there can be such things genuinely done, and we'd like to see one. We'd like to see that effort now put into the Brick Lane area. Right, my other question, and I'm going to try and be fairly quick because we're supposedly ending, is just what you mentioned, So, and this is for Rihanna really, but you mentioned two things. One is that if you mentioned two things. One was that the small units were kind of conducive to a certain kind of way of doing business, both from selling things, but also creating, creating business. If I make a business, but you also said, and what I'm thinking is, how do you translate that into what do we do with a problem like the Truman Brewery site? So there's this smaller units, but you also mentioned that there's a problem with growth and the spaces to grow into. So I'm wondering, and I'm kind of pointing this to you, Rihanna, so thinking with an East End Trades Guild hat on, is how that translates into what you do with a problem like the Truman Brewery. What would you do to engender the right kind of space?
Well, I haven't got the exact, I'm just a member of the Trades Guild, so I'm sort of repping on the behalf, but I know that there's definitely, one of the things that we're talking about is new developments, having a commitment to keeping affordable working rents for small and independent businesses, and putting a portion, I think, I recall there being something like a 10% discount, but that isn't enough. It needs to be much, much higher. And so that can be something that's part of the planning application, that can be forced, that the developer has to provide in the same way, with like affordable housing and a residential development, that can be something that's afforded, but also how you ensure that local businesses that are already in the area have access to those, and it's then not newcomers who benefit from it. So the legals of which is too much of me, but I think it's really important that is something that can be considered when big planning developments come. Sorry about my dark video.
Yeah, and
my son has gone to sleep in the room, so I've had to turn the lights off.
Just one point of that in terms of what's being on offer at this plan is you mentioned the affordable. Well, I think they've got affordable off. I don't know if the brand's running, but there was some affordable retail space. We'll just look at that bit. The offer is, as it stands, miserable. It's 10% of the spaces are on offer for a 30% discount on market rent. And then they use this phrase, they're on offer for small operators, or the independent businesses, I think they call them. But their definition of independent is a chain of no more than 10 shops. For me, the kind of definition of independence that we want to see is a business that you can walk into and ask to speak to the owner, and you can speak to the owner. I think as soon as you get involved in chains of any size, you've lost that spirit. Right, now we've really kind of run out of time now. And also, so I'm just going to play one more thing, which is a little thing, a very short piece by Dan Cruikshank, and we'll end on that. But also I wanted to say thanks to everyone who's helped put this together, and in particular to Susanna Cow and Jamie Rory Lucy, who've been fantastic in helping put those video pieces together and put a great deal of effort into it. So thank you. And to play us out, we've got Dan Cruikshank and the people from Assemble talking about the battle for Brick Lane. So thanks everyone for coming, and thanks Rana, and thanks Saif for contributing. Now I'm on shared screen. I'm going to get this wrong again. Let's try that. Yeah, and then that.
I'm on Brick Lane, surrounded by the buildings of the old Truman Brewery. Now, there's been a brewery on this site since at least the late 17th century. This is at the heart of historic Spitalfields. It is too important a site to be left simply to the private owned at the moment. So what the Spitalfields Trust has done to move things forward is to hold an exhibition. The exhibition puts forward an idea of a master plan, where all the site is considered, again, for the public benefits it can offer, housing and workshops and open space. Also, the exhibition with a model will allow people, we hope, to participate, to engage. to give their views, let us know what they want. All this information should be fed into the development of a community-led master plan.
My name's Louis Schultz.
My name's Shay Delican.
And we're from Assemble, which is a design and architecture practice based in London.
So we've currently been doing an artist residency based in the building on 25 Princess Street, and we've been contacting different people in the area, looking at getting involved with different campaigns and local people fighting for housing rights and land reform.
You know, the Brick Lane area is hugely important. The Truman Brewery is a really important part of the area. You know, historically it was the biggest employer, and it forms this kind of enormous presence in Brick Lane. And I guess what we're trying to say is that whatever happens, whatever's the future of that space, that huge space, should be a question for the community, the people that live and work in Brick Lane.
My name is Sebastian Harding, and I'm an artist. Spitalfields Trust approached me to ask me to create an artwork inspired by the Truman Brewery. One of the things that I wanted to do with this commission was create something that would be of interest both to people who are architecture enthusiasts, but also to people who live in the area, who might know the buildings from having used them, having shopped in them. So create something that kind of appealed to everyone really and made them think about this area, which is so important.
This site is privately owned, and really it is too large to be developed privately for private profits. It is so important, not just to Spitalfields and the people who live and work here, but for London as a whole. It has to be considered as a great public asset and developed for the public benefit. So the Trust is trying to evolve a community-led master plan. The first stage is to invite public participation, talking to people who live and work here. What do the people want? What do they need for this area to thrive, to continue being a very special part of London? What I say at stake here is the heart and soul of Spitalfields for the years to come.
Brilliant. And that's it. Thanks very much for attending. Thanks for being here. Now the last act is to work out how to turn the webinar off. See, there's a button on the screen somewhere, surely.
Found it, no.
No. If I just quit Zoom, that might do the job. Let's try. Yeah. Okay. See you all. Bye.